All right, welcome everybody around the world. Hopefully everybody can hear my microphone. Okay, yes, it looks like it's working. All right, so I have a very interesting video here today. I've often thought this about Exodus 19, but today what I did was I just spent about an hour or so compiling um, various support and proof for it from the scripture. So I think it's pretty rock solid here. So what this shows is that in Exodus 19, the things that Moses wrote, the story of Moses atop Mount Sinai and all that it's actually a parallel and a foreshadowing, pretty verbatim, as to what would occur with Messiah. But more importantly, it shows the timing of the arrival of the end days, right? So when God and Messiah would return to the earth. So in Judaism, in the Tanakh, because they obviously don't believe in Jesus, all the verses that they use about the end days in the Tanakh, because they obviously don't use the New Testament at all, those verses are about God coming down upon Israel, upon the mountain of God, and there's great fire and everything, heavenly fire. Okay, um, we do see as Christians in the New Testament similar said as well. You also see in the prophecy of the Gog Magog from the book of Ezekiel. That's one example where you see this fire coming down in the Old Testament in the Tanakh. In the New Testament, it's in the book of Revelation and such. So, nonetheless, what we know will happen in the end days is that there's going to be this great tumult around Israel and Jerusalem, and that at some point God is going to suddenly arrive with Messiah, with the legions of angels, with heavenly fire, and it will descend down upon the earth. And also great hail, which is either comet debris or meteors or whatnot. And all of this is going to rain down upon the earth because comets are frozen water. So if comet debris was to fall down, you could rightfully call it hail because hail is frozen water. But it could also represent, stones like meteors or asteroid fragments or whatnot. But anyways, this is what we know is going to happen at the very, very end. God's going to arrive, like I said, with Messiah. Heavenly fire will be raining down upon the earth. So if we all collectively agree that's going to occur, whether you're from Judaism or Christianity, I think this discovery here in Exodus 19 is relevant to both. But I'll still stylize this video as suited for Christianity, but I think it's still beneficial to hear. I'm just not going to make two separate videos. So in Exodus 19, we see the following, right? But I just want to start off with this little intro here first. Got a few little paragraphs here build up into it so you could appreciate the meaningfulness of it. So in Hosea 6:2, we have the famous prophecy where it says, He does revive us after 2 days, and the third day He does raise us up, and we live before Him. Okay, and this is also hinted at by Jesus when He said in Luke 13:32, and He said to them, having gone, say to this fox, Lo, I cast forth demons and perfect cures today and tomorrow, and on the third day I am being perfected. So, just very quick, what this ties to is the 7,000 year prophecy, or God's week prophecy, whatever you want to call it, where there would be 6,000 years to mankind to toil in their mortality, and then a seventh day, which is Sabbath rest, because a day with God's like 1,000 years and so forth. Everybody knows that. Psalm 90s, where it says that a day is like 1,000 years. And but two, maybe three places in the New Testament, it says the same. So, but everybody knows these things, and that's important. So, knowing that God does work by 1,000 year days, it's all fair to say that there would be 6,000 years to man. Now, I've shown in my books, which you can get on Amazon, but in the first chapter of my End Days Proofs book, I map out the whole chronology from the birth of Seth all the way up to the very, very end to our current year. And we can see that it's exactly 6,000 years without question, without any room for error. It's all there, all the verses, all the quotes, everything is right there. All the math's broken out step by step. I've said this a million times. But the importance of the takeaway from that is that it has been 6,000 years now. Okay, we can't ignore that point, right? But more importantly, it would make sense if God did stylize it like this, where humankind would have 6,000 years in mortality, and then at the end of that period will come the judgment and the arrival of this third day. Where that becomes relevant, like I said, is if the talk of on the third day will be healed. What this implies, what everybody agrees on, is that this third day represents that millennial Sabbath, the 1,000 year Sabbath, the end of God's week, the seventh day of God's holy divine week of 7,000 years. okay, which would directly and logically imply, as everybody knows, that the two aforementioned days that transpire first are obviously 2,000 years before the end, so to speak, right? So that would be day 5 and day 6. Okay, so day 5 and day 6, and then day 7 is the 1,000 year Sabbath. Okay, so that means we have days 1, 2, 3, and 4 that transpire before day 5 and day 6. Okay, so that's where that concept ties into the 7,000 year or 6,000 year theory, if you want to call it whichever one you want to call it. Um, so where Hosea 6:2 says he does revive us after 2 days, and the third day he does raise us up. That's what I mean. I just explained it for that sake. Now, getting to Exodus 19, right? We just have to keep that stuff in mind here because all of this is working by that parameter of God's divine week. Okay, so we know that Moses famously said and spoke of the Messiah when he said, God will raise up a prophet like me out of the people and so forth, and you got to obey him or else. Everybody knows that, right? But so also keep that in the back of your mind now, right? So in Exodus 19 with Moses, right, they're at Sinai, and God's about to come down to Sinai, and he says some very important things to Moses, right? This is a very important time in Israel's history, okay? And quite frankly, I think it's an obvious foreshadowing of what would occur with Messiah. And also, in the same breath, what it does is it reveals the timing of the end, when God would arrive with the Messiah, and when, therefore, the end of days would arrive. So here we go. So this does a couple of paragraphs of intro, right? In the third day of God's week, the week being that 7,000 year week, right? And taking it from the birth of Seth, who was the firstborn son of man, son of woman. So in the third day of God's week, Moses rose up the people to God at Sinai to redeem them. So that setting in Exodus 19, I'm about to read, this is where they've all been gathered to Sinai. God's about to come down to Sinai, and the people are told to wait around the bottom and to not climb up. Otherwise, stones will come down and hit them. Okay? So in the third day of God's week, this is when, like I said, Moses rose up the people to God at Sinai to redeem them. He also foretold of Messiah, as I aforementioned, who'd be a prophet like him. Now, what occurred with Moses at Sinai was an obvious foreshadow, like I said, of the Messiah, in that the Messiah in his own time would do like Moses did here at Sinai and rise up the people to God to redeem them by teaching reformation and giving 2,000 years to be cleansed for the arrival of God and return of Messiah at the start of the third day. So whereas Moses did it on the third day of God's week, if you're talking about in terms of thousands of years, so Moses did what he did at Exodus 19 there during the third day of God's week. I checked all the numbers out before doing this. So whereas Moses did it in the third day of God's week, the reign of Mosaic law in Israel would begin at the end of the fourth day. Messiah would do the same at the dawn of the fifth day, giving the 2 full last days for mankind to repent in. So quick little micro summary. Third day, here in Exodus 19, Moses, who's existing in the actual and literal third day of God's week, right? Moses is a parallel to Jesus here in Exodus 19, to the Messiah, with relation to the 2,000 years to come after Jesus. Moses, these are just quick micro summaries, right? If you don't understand it, then I'm sorry, but it links to all the other things I've been talking about for aeons, right? Just a quick little micro summary introduction. But Moses existed during the middle of the third day of God's week from Seth. The first temple was built 2,967 years after Seth at the end of this third day. Okay, so a quick micro summary for the fourth day. That was the cat, sorry. So for the fourth day, at the end of Solomon's reign, 3,003 years after Seth's birth, of course, the start of the bad 999 years of Israel's reign would begin at the start of the fourth day. The temple fell and was later rebuilt all within this fourth day, and Jesus was baptized at the end of the fourth day in 23 AD, which was 4,000 years after the birth of Seth, and he died in the 4,002nd year from Seth, which would be 3 years after his baptism. So considering all this, right, I know that was a mouthful. That was a lot. It's actually a lot simpler than you think. If you hear it, I think a second or a third time, it's quite clear and simple. So here's Exodus 19, starting from verse 9. And it's quite a chunk of Exodus 19, but here we go. When I read this, like I said, This is talking about Moses, and this is what Moses tangibly did in the third day of God's week. Okay? But Moses uses the terms here about preparing for 2 days and God will arrive on the third day. And we know from Hosea that same terminology was used. We also know from Jesus the same terminology was used, that after 2 days that the healing will come on the third day. So there's a reason that that terminology has been used in these different places, like there's a little triangulation going on, right? So if you read Exodus 19:9, we'll appreciate all of that, right? So it says, "And God said unto Moses, Lo, I'm coming unto thee in the thickness of the cloud." So when I read this, just remember, it's on the lower level, it's about Moses, what he did in his time during the third day of God's week. But it was also a foreshadow of what the Messiah would do in his time, which was Messiah came and he died at the end of the fourth day, just after, in the 4002nd year, right? So he died at the end of the fourth day. So Moses was here doing this in the middle of the third day, okay? But it was a foreshadow of what Messiah would do 2,000 years before the end, okay? So God says to Moses, "Lo, I'm coming unto thee in the thickness of the..." Oh, and also on a third level, it's also a foreshadow of what would happen when God arrives to the earth with Messiah at the end of days. Can't forget to say that, sorry. So those are the levels here, right? It's all very, very clear. I'm not reaching in any of this. So God said to Moses, "Lo, I'm coming unto thee in the thickness of the cloud, so that the people hear in my speaking with thee, and also believe in thee to the age." So on the lower level with Moses, just meaning in terms of how recent, that furthest back. So with Moses and what occurred first in the most ancient in time, this lowest level with Moses, it's happening as is said, okay? In terms of being a foreshadow of what happened with Messiah, when Messiah was approved at the baptism of Jesus, God spoke from the cloud and announced and approved him as Messiah in front of witnesses, okay? And at the end of days, God and Messiah come with the clouds of the heavens. So those are the three levels, right? So in Exodus 19:9, "And God said unto Moses, Lo, I'm coming unto thee in the thickness of the clouds, so that the people hear in my speaking with thee, and also believe in thee to the age. And Moses declareth the words of the people unto God. And God said unto Moses, Go unto the people, and thou hast sanctified them today and tomorrow." That's the 2 days, today and tomorrow. "And they have washed their garments," which symbolizes you, your life as a person, right? "And have been prepared for the third day." Okay, so this third day is the day of the resurrection, the healing. It's the end of times. It's the start of that seventh day of God's week, right? So God told Moses, "Go unto the people, and thou hast sanctified them today and tomorrow, and they have washed their garments and been prepared for the third day. For on the third day does God come down before the eyes of all the people on Mount Sinai. And thou hast made a border for the people round about the mountain, saying, Take heed to yourselves, going in up to the mount, or coming against its extremity. Whoever is coming against the mount is certainly put to death. A hand cometh not against him, for he is certainly stoned or shot through. Whether beast or man, it liveth not. In the drawing out of the jubilee cornet, they go up into the mount." So what he's saying is that at the time of the arrival of God, if you try to rush up to the mountain ahead of time, you're going to be bombarded by all this heavenly fire and stone. Now we know from the Old and New Testament prophecy of the end days, when God Messiah arrived, there will be heavenly fire and stone coming down over Israel, but to protect Israel from all the nations and peoples who have mounted up and surrounded it. Okay, so that stuff will be coming down. So in this parallel fashion, we can see that the beasts and the people being told to wait at the bottom of the mountain in the end days, the way it parallels over to the end days, that represents all the sinners of the nations who will be surrounding, outside of Israel, whether literally surrounding it or just outside of Israel. In that symbolic sense, they're the impure ones. Okay, if they try to go in, they're going to be destroyed by the heavenly fire that's coming down like a ring to protect around Jerusalem and Israel, right? As God says in the prophecy. So that's where this parallels over to that. He says, "Whoever is coming against the mountain is certainly put to death. A hand doesn't come against him, for he's certainly stoned or shot through." So nobody's throwing the stone or anything like that there, but he is stoned or shot through. So these are going to be rocks and stones coming from out of nowhere. which is obviously the heavenly cosmic bombardment, like the Bible foretells. So, and then it says, and Moses cometh down from the mount unto the people and sanctifieth the people, and they wash their garments. Now, in parallel with the Messiah, with Jesus, when Jesus came, after Jesus had been approved by God at his baptism, that's when he began sanctifying the people by teaching them Reformation so that they could have remission of sins and all of that. And that's right here. He sanctified the people in parallel, and they washed their garments. And he saith to the people, be prepared for the third day, come not nigh unto a woman. And I think what this means in symbolic parallel is clearly don't ascribe to false teachings. You know, a woman represents the church or Israel, right? So it'd be like an adulterous woman or you know what I mean, a harlot or something like that. They are leading you astray. Don't go aside to another woman, right? So be prepared for the third day. Come not nigh unto a woman. And it cometh to pass on the third day, while it is morning, that there are voices and lightnings and a heavy cloud on the mount, and the sound of a trumpet very strong, and all the people who are in the camp do tremble. So again, remember, this is all happening on three levels here in the scripture, okay? On the lowest level, this is what was occurring with Moses. But like I said, it's a foreshadow of what would transpire with the Messiah, with Jesus, okay? And we know that Jesus foretold that I've talked about it in my book and in my other videos more heavily, right? But Jesus foretold, like Hosea did, that there would be 2,000 years and then the end. Okay, after Jesus was baptized, there would be 2,000 years until 2024. Okay, that's the reality of it there. And that ties into a lot of other important biblical prophecies, but I just don't have time for that in this video here today. Now, anyways, going on. So he says, be prepared for the third day, and come not nigh to a woman. And when it cometh to pass in the third day, while it's morning, there were voices and lightnings and a heavy cloud on the mount, and the sound of a trumpet very strong, and all the people who are in the camp do tremble. And Moses bringeth out all the people to meet God from the camp. So when Jesus died, right, there were many miracles that occurred, and then Jesus returned to the people and all of that, right? But here's the final portion of Exodus 19. And Moses bringeth out the people to meet God from the camp, and they station themselves at the lower part of the mount. And Mount Sinai is holy as smoke from the presence of God, who has come down on it in fire, and its smoke goeth up as the smoke of a furnace. And the whole mount trembleth exceedingly, and the sound of the trumpet is going on and very strong. Moses speaketh, and God does answer him with a voice. And God cometh down on the Mount Sinai unto the top of the mount, and God calleth for Moses unto the top of the mount, and Moses goeth up. So where this parallels to the end days is quite clear. Now, we as Christians, right, with the book of Revelation have something quite astonishing here. So in Revelation 8, most Christians don't even know this. I've tried to teach this for 7 years. It's in my books as well. But nonetheless, once you crack and solve the mystery of Revelation, it's all quite clear. So you have 7 seals, 7 trumpets, and 7 vials. Now, a lot of the times, they're lining up with one another. So what they're doing is they're actually verbatim describing the same one event. It's just one is a trumpet, one is a seal, and one is a vial perspective. But when you read the words, it's literal. This is actually and factually the case, and anybody who says otherwise doesn't know what they're talking about. It's clear as day. Everybody's just been oblivious to that. Here's a prime example. So the 7th seal, 7th trumpet, and 7th vial, this is perhaps the best example in there. They are clearly describing all the same one event. It is the very final thing of all the Revelation events on the final day itself. This will be it, the very, very end. So in Revelation 8:5, notice what it says. It says, and the messenger took the censer and did fill it, this is the 7th seal, and did fill it out of the fire of the altar, and they cast it to the earth. And there came voices and thunders and lightnings and an earthquake. And it later says, in great hail. Okay? So remember those terms, right? Now in Revelation 11:19, this is the 7th trumpet. It says, and opened was the sanctuary of God in the heaven, and there was seen the ark of his covenant in the sanctuary, and there to come lightnings and voices and thunders and an earthquake and great hail. Exact same terms. And then in Revelation 16:18, with the 7th vial, it says, and there came voices and thunders and lightnings, a great earthquake came, such as not since men came upon the earth, so mighty an earthquake, so great. And then there's also hail. So it's clearly talking about the exact same one event. And it's the very, very last one. But the important thing is that, like I said, Exodus 19 is a foreshadow to the very, very end, the end of days, and uses the same terms, right? So when God appears on the mountain, what happens, right? So we should be looking for, where is it? Lightnings, voices, and thunders, an earthquake, and great hail. Okay, so let's go read Exodus 19. What did it mention all those things? Yes, it did, right? So, and it cometh to pass on the third day while it is morning that there are voices and lightnings and a heavy cloud on the mount, and the sound of a trumpet very strong. Now, it doesn't say thunders, right? But it's got trumpet. That's pretty good. We know that the final trumpet involves all of these things, right? So I think that it says heavy cloud and a trumpet. So it doesn't say thunder. I'll give it that. But it's got voices and lightnings and a trumpet. Okay. And then it says, Mount Sinai is holy as smoke from the presence of God, who has come down on it in fire, and its smoke goeth up as the smoke of a furnace, and the whole mount trembleth exceedingly, and the sound of the trumpet is going on. So we have the earthquake, the whole mountain's trembling exceedingly. Okay, and instead of mentioning stones coming down, it's talking about God has come down on it in fire. But it still lines up with what Ezekiel and the other old Tanakh prophets said, that this heavenly fire would come down. Right? It's the New Testament, like I said, that specifies rocks and all that, or hail, whatever it might be. But it's all the same terms. So when God came down upon Mount Sinai, in the case of Moses, we had the same 5 things taking place: thunders, lightning, voices, hail, and an earthquake. All that transpired, or heavenly fire and stone, whatever, heavenly hail of fire that came down, and an earthquake. All this transpired, and that's what is said to occur at the end of days. So I think it's very obvious that Exodus 19 is supposed to be a foreshadowing of what would happen with Messiah. So, and also at the end of days. So in that fashion, if you consider God's week of 7,000 years, it's quite clear. If you understand, like I was saying in my introduction, if you go back and listen to the introduction again, I'm not going to repeat it all, right? But Moses was doing his thing, as is described here, in the middle of the third day, okay? Messiah would arrive, be baptized, and then die at the very end of the fourth day and at the start of the fifth. So you'd have the fifth and the sixth day of the week to cleanse yourselves by Messiah's teachings, as you should do, stop sinning and all that. You'd have 2 days to wash yourselves, because on the third day God arrives with Messiah. That's the whole essence here, right? It's very, very clear and obvious. It's got all the same descriptive terms. So I think it goes to that question that Exodus 19 is a foreshadow of what would occur. But importantly, that also helps prove when the end of days would arrive, because it's talking about 2000, it's laying out the divine week. So it's laid out the divine week for you. It's talking about the fifth, the sixth, and the seventh day. It's got 2 days to cleanse yourselves to prepare, and then that final one. So it's talked about 3 full days out of the week. And like I said, if you map this over to God's divine week and you look at the Bible chronology, like I've shown in the first chapter of my book that you can get on Amazon, the 6,000 years from the birth of Seth, the first mortal, end in 2024. Okay, so by this fashion, Moses is also revealed, because Moses wrote the books of Genesis, from where I derived all those numbers for the chronology. Okay, so Moses did truthfully and technically, it was him, same one guy, Moses. He revealed the timing of the end of days, when God and Messiah would arrive, the rapture, and all that. So there you go, folks. So can't say nobody told you. But anyways, I hope you all enjoyed that. So take care and God bless.